The lobby of the Marcelli Tower was the kind of place that swallowed sound. Polished marble floors reflected overhead chandeliers like ice, and the wide glass doors closed behind her with a hiss, sealing the winter outside. The soft click of her heels echoed across the lobby, the only human sound in a room designed to intimidate. People didn't come here uninvited. They were escorted, summoned, collected like debts. And Elena Navarro was no exception. Two men in black suits walked on either side of her, silent and expressionless. Their shoulders were thick, their eyes colder than the wind outside, and the guns at their ribs weren't hidden, just politely concealed by expensive fabric. She wasn't handcuffed. She wasn't threatened. She was simply chosen. Straight ahead, one of them murmured. His voice was the sound of gravel and fate. At the far end of the lobby, an elevator waited. Not the public one, not the one the rich used either. The private one, the one that went all the way to the top. The doors slid open without a sound. Elena's heart hammered. She stepped in. The guards did not. They stayed outside like statues, giving the kind of nod soldiers give before sending someone to war. Their job ended at the threshold. What happened above was between her and the man who owned the skyline. The elevator doors sealed, and with a gentle jolt they began to rise. That was when she heard him, a voice behind her, deep, smooth, a voice that carried command like a weapon. "You're late." She spun. He was leaning against the mirrored wall, arms crossed, dark suit molded to his frame like a second skin. Hair slicked back. Tie loosened as if the world bent before him and he didn't need to dress for it. Not tall, no. Towering, like a cathedral made of muscle and scars. Cassian Valenti. The name people whispered instead of speaking. He wasn't supposed to be downstairs. He wasn't supposed to escort her. There were 10 layers of hierarchy between her and him, but Cassian Valenti didn't obey rules. He authored them. Elena swallowed. You didn't tell me. I shouldn't have to. He interrupted. His eyes, sharp storm gray, didn't look at her clothes or her posture. They looked at her pulse point, her breathing, her nerves. He knew everything without her saying a word. The elevator began its smooth ascent up the tower. She steadied herself, fingers twitching at her side. Only then did she notice the faint scent of his cologne, cedar and smoke. The kind of scent that stuck to a woman's memory long after the night was over. Cassian stepped forward, closing the space between them with the lazy confidence of a man who had never been told no. "Your name," he said. "Elena. Your real name." She blinked. "That is my real name." Cassian smiled, slow, wolfish, patient. The kind of smile that made people confess things they didn't even know they'd done. "Good," he murmured. "You'll need it when you pretend." "Pretend?" she echoed. He leaned close enough that she felt the warmth of him through the winter chill clinging to her coat. "Pretend you're my wife," he said. The words hit her like a blow. Wife. Not assistant. Not friend. Not escort. Wife. Her pulse spiked. I don't understand." "You don't need to," Cassian replied. "You just need to do it." The elevator's digital display ticked up. 33, 34. Elena's mind raced. "Cassian. Mr. Valenti," he corrected. Her throat tightened. "Mr. Valenti. Why me?" He didn't look away. He didn't blink. He simply tilted his head, studying her like an object. "A weapon. A secret. Because," he said, "you don't know how to lie with your eyes." A chill crawled down her spine. He turned slightly, hands sliding casually into his pockets, as though they were discussing the weather. "There will be reporters," he continued. "Investors. Lawyers who pretend to be loyal. A politician who wishes he still had leverage over me. They all want a weakness." He looked over his shoulder at her. "And tonight, you will be mine." Her knees nearly buckled. The elevator hummed higher. 41, 42, 43. And if I refuse? She whispered. Cassian stepped close enough that his breath brushed the curve of her jaw. Then the people waiting above will tear into you, he said softly. And I won't stop them. The words should have been a threat. They weren't. They were a statement of nature. Like gravity. Like winter. She stared up at him, trying to swallow the fear in her throat. You want me to pretend? She said, gathering what scraps of composure she had left. But you haven't told me the rules. Cassian's lips curved, not a smile this time, but a promise. There is only one. He leaned close, so close she felt his heartbeat through the elevator's still air, and whispered it against her ear. What he said was quiet. Soft. Barely audible. But it ruined her. Because it wasn't romantic. It wasn't protective. It wasn't gentle. It was, you cannot fall in love with me. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. And her fate walked out first. The sound in the penthouse was wrong. Not chaotic. Not loud. Wrong in that way luxury gatherings always felt when the price of admission wasn't money, but power. The elevator doors slid closed behind Elena with a soft, final hiss like silk being drawn across a throat. Cassian walked ahead. His stride unhurried. Shoulders relaxed. Every cell of him exuding a kind of gravitational pull. The man didn't own the room. Rooms rearranged themselves around him. She followed. Half a step behind. As he'd instructed. That alone told her everything about the hierarchy up here. The penthouse wasn't a space. It was a throne carved from glass and city light. Floor-to-ceiling windows embraced the skyline, swallowing the horizon whole. A sea of skyscrapers blinked beneath them like dying stars. The snow outside fell sideways, illuminated by streetlights far below, like ash from something burning in heaven. Inside, warm gold reflected off polished floors. Crystal chandeliers dripped from polished beams. Low laughter cut through the air like the clink of forks against porcelain. People stood in clusters. Politicians, investors, attorneys with smiles that looked stapled on. Their suits cost more than most cars. Perfume hung in the air like invisible armor. Elena felt them notice her, not with surprise, not curiosity, with calculation. Eyes slid over her like hands, measuring value, extracting information. Every stare whispered a question. Who is she to him? And more importantly, what is she worth? Cassian didn't slow. He didn't adjust to her pace. He simply expected her to keep up or drown trying. They approached the first group. A ring of men with wine glasses. Confident smirks. The kind of posture that only comes when ruin is something done to others. Never suffered personally. Cassian didn't greet them. They greeted him. A gray-templed financier stepped forward. Smile surgically precise. Valenti, he murmured. We thought you'd be later. Cassian lifted a brow. You assume incorrectly. The man laughed too hard, like someone who had been conditioned to laugh at whatever Cassian said. Then his gaze slid to Elena, curiosity tightening his eyes. And this? Cassian didn't let him finish. He moved a half-step closer to her, a subtle pivot that placed her within his shadow rather than beside it. My wife, he said. 3 letters. 1 word. And every conversation in a 20-foot radius paused. Not dramatically. Not audibly. But like muscles silently pulling tight beneath tailored suits. Elena felt her lungs hit. It was worse hearing it here in front of witnesses. The word transforming into something with weight and permanence. Wife. A mask that was suddenly real. The financier blinked. His smile frayed just slightly. Not because he cared about Cassian's romantic life, but because he had just realized something dangerous. Cassian Valenti had revealed a vulnerability. Even if it was fake, the illusion of one changed the battlefield. Congratulations. The man lied politely. A surprise for all of us. Cassian's lips barely moved. It was for me as well. A few chuckles. The financier looked at Elena again, now like she was an unexploded device that had been placed near the heart of the empire. Cassian leaned in, brushing his lips against Elena's cheek, a gesture soft enough to look tender, controlled enough to be a warning. She didn't know how she managed not to flinch. "Smile," he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. "They're tearing you apart in their heads." She did. It was small, hesitant, but not weak. A smile that said, "I belong here," even if she didn't. Cassian straightened. "This is a social evening," he announced to the cluster. Voice casual, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal the forearm veins of a man who solved problems without paperwork. Not a negotiation. A light jab wrapped in honey. The financier swallowed it because men like him always did. Of course. Cassian moved on. Elena still beside him, heart pounding like wings trapped behind ribs. They wove through the room like sharks through schools of fish. People parted before them without realizing they did. Women in diamonds leaned toward Cassian as he passed, hoping for acknowledgement. Men who'd never feared anyone in their lives avoided eye contact. Everyone wanted something from him. No one really wanted him. Halfway to the main hall, a man with too much cologne and too little dignity intercepted them. His hair was slicked back like a mirror, and a ring the size of a molar sat on his finger. "Elena Navarro," he said, drawing out her name like a secret he had purchased. "Accounts specialist at Armitage Holdings. Or am I mistaken?" Her spine snapped straight. That wasn't public knowledge. Cassian's hand grazed her lower back. Not affectionate, not sexual, but protective. Just a brush. To remind her, "You're not alone. Not tonight." "No," Cassian said calmly. "You're just predictable." The man blinked. "Excuse me. You wander into my events sniffing for gossip like a stray dog. And like a dog, you think knowing a name is the same thing as having leverage." People nearby went quiet. Cassian stepped closer, not raising his voice, not smiling. "But I don't keep leverage in elevators," he murmured. "I bury it in cemeteries." The color drained from the man's cheeks. He retreated. Cassian didn't even watch him go. He simply turned to Elena and said, as if he'd just asked her about wine, "Do you understand now why you're here?" She swallowed. "So they don't attack you." "No," he said. "So they don't get brave." The words hit harder than the threats. Bravery was currency here. Cassian had just bought all of it. With her standing beside him, they reached the banquet room. A long table stretched beneath a chandelier like a star frozen mid-fall. Crystal glasses, white roses, knives that gleamed like promises. Cassian pulled out a chair. Not for a guest, not for a business partner. For her. She sat, legs weak, hands folded. He occupied the seat at the head of the table, calm, a man who had already won a war no one else realized was happening. Talk resumed around them like nothing happened. But Elena saw the truth in every cut glance. They weren't looking at Cassian anymore. They were looking at her. The supposed wife. The weakness. The target. And Cassian, he ate in silence. One hand on the wine glass. One eye on every room reflection. Guarded. Watching. Calculating. Then, he spoke without looking at her. "You did well." Elena's heart jumped at the praise. "What did I do?" "You existed," he said. And they bled fear because of it. She stared at him. The man who told her not to fall in love, and realized something terrifying. He hadn't said she couldn't fall in love. He said she couldn't fall in love with him. Because falling in love with a man like Cassian Valenti wasn't romance. It was a death sentence. For the first hour, the banquet hall was a theater of masks. Laughter that wasn't laughter. Compliments sharpened into blades. Smiles with venom threaded into the gums. And everywhere Elena looked, people pretended they belonged in Cassian Valenti's world. They didn't. They were guests, petting zoo lions who believed the cage was theirs, simply because it was open. She sat quietly, posture careful, breathing slow, letting Cassian's presence do the defending. No one spoke to her without looking at him first. Not one. It was as if she were a vase, valuable because of the hands that carried it. She hated that. But Cassian understood the game in ways she could only feel on the surface. He drank wine like a man who didn't taste it. He smiled rarely. He listened more than he spoke, and every time someone lied to him, he didn't correct them. He filed it away like a receipt. The band started playing something soft, slow, string instruments floating like smoke over candlelight. A Mafia boss did not need music. Music was something provided to keep everyone else from hearing their own heartbeat. Then a man rose. Not just any man. Adrian D'Amico. Silver hair, eyes folded at the edges from deals made in late-night parking lots. Former judge before retirement became necessary. He held a glass of champagne with theatrical grace, smiling like everyone at the table owed him rent. Cassian didn't move, didn't blink. Adrian cleared his throat, letting the room hush. His gaze swept across the table and landed on Cassian like an old hunter examining a new wolf. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced. It was the tone of someone who didn't ask permission, only forgiveness after the damage. "Tonight," he continued, raising his glass, "we celebrate Mr. Valenti's newest achievement." A ripple of curiosity moved through the room. Eyes flickered. Elena braced. Cassian leaned back in his chair, fingers resting casually on his glass, as if the night bored him. "His marriage," Adrian smiled, "that none of us knew about." Polite laughter, thin, uncomfortable. Elena felt her stomach twist. Cassian did not laugh. He didn't even smirk. Adrian continued, sensing opportunity. "In this business," he said, "loyalty is our truest currency. Our most valuable commodity." He lifted his glass toward Elena. "And what is a wife," he asked, "if not the ultimate proof of loyalty?" Elena's spine stiffened. This wasn't a toast. This was a probe. A test. Adrian watched her like a doctor waiting to see if the patient responded to the drug. "Elena," he said sweetly, "tell us, how did you meet our dear Cassian?" The room went quiet. It wasn't curiosity. It was the sound hyenas made before circling a lion when they believed the lion might actually bleed. Cassian didn't look at her. He didn't tap her leg. He didn't warn her. He simply sat there, the stillness of him a challenge and a shield. "Tell us." Her throat tightened. She could feel 20 stares pressing into her like needles. If she froze now, she'd die socially in this room before the night even began. So she did something Cassian didn't teach her. Something instinctual. She reached for his hand. His fingers were warm, strong, coated in that silent authority that made lesser men tremble. He didn't pull away. Elena turned her gaze to the table, letting the silence stretch, letting them wait. "When I first met him," she said calmly, "I didn't know who he was." A few chuckles. Adrian smirked. Of course the girl didn't know. Of course she was naive. "But I knew one thing," Elena added. She lifted her eyes steady, voice poised. "I knew everyone else did." The table went quiet again. A subtle shift in power. A disruption they hadn't expected. Adrian's smile loosened a touch. Not much. Just enough to show she'd landed a hit. Elena continued. "I didn't fall in love with Cassian Valenti," she said. "I fell in love with the man who looked at me like I wasn't afraid of him." Cassian's fingers tightened around hers, just slightly, just enough that only she could feel it. And that was when she realized. He hadn't prepared her for this moment. He'd let her walk into it to see if she could swim with sharks. Adrian lifted his glass high, voice sharp. "To the wife." His eyes gleamed like knives. "To the woman who holds the leash." A gasp rippled around the table, too soft to scream, too loud to ignore. Cassian moved. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic. He simply stood, slow, controlled, like an earthquake that refused to hurry. He picked up his wine glass. And they all froze. Because when Cassian Valenti moved, everyone remembered they were prey. He raised his glass. To the man, he said softly, who mistook a lion's mate for a leash. Every head snapped toward Adrian. Cassian smiled. A smile without warmth, without mercy. When a leash tugs, he continued, it means its owner wants the dog home. He lowered the glass, gaze steady. But if you tug a lion, he stepped closer to Adrian, lose your hand. Adrian's face drained. Wine glasses trembled. No one laughed. Not a single body drew breath too loudly. And in the space of 5 seconds, Elena understood something devastating. Cassian hadn't just defended her. He had claimed her. Not gently. Not romantically. Like territory. Like domain. Like bloodline. The toast ended without another word. People resumed their conversations in the way people resume after a near car crash. Carefully, shaken, pretending nothing happened. Cassian sat again. He didn't look at Elena this time. He didn't squeeze her hand again. He simply lifted his wine and said with a calmness that made her shiver, "Never tell them how we met." Her voice caught. "Why?" Cassian didn't blink. "Because the truth," he murmured, "is a weapon I don't trust anyone else to hold." And the room, as if obeying some ancient instinct, fell completely, utterly quiet around him. The banquet dissolved around them like melting ice. Conversations resumed, yes, but nobody truly spoke. They murmured in low voices, glancing sideways. Suddenly aware that the air in the room now belonged to Cassian Valenti and everything in it was listening. Elena didn't look at them. She didn't dare. Her heart beat unevenly in her chest. Not from fear but something sharper, harder to name. Like standing at the edge of a cliff you weren't sure you wanted to jump from. Or climb back down. Cassian stood without announcing it. No toast. No farewell. No explanation. He simply rose. And the world whispered, "Get out of his way." His security men, silent shadows, didn't escort him. They followed. He didn't motion for Elena. He didn't say her name. He didn't offer his arm. He just began to walk, and somehow her legs carried her after him. The corridor outside the banquet was quieter, but colder, the kind of silence expensive buildings cultivate so the wealthy can hear their own thoughts echo off the marble. Cassian spoke before she could. "You lied well." Elena blinked. "I didn't lie." He stopped walking. He didn't turn. The sound of the storm outside pressed against the windows like a hungry animal. "Of course you lied," Cassian said quietly. "Everyone does. Even the good ones. Especially the scared ones." She swallowed, heat pulsing in her throat. "I just told them what felt true in that moment." Now he turned. Slowly. Not with anger. Not with amusement. With curiosity. "That was worse. That is lying," he murmured. "It's just the kind you think you can live with." He stepped closer. Not a predator stalking. A confession about to be carved into the air. "You said you fell in love with the man who didn't want you to fear him." His eyes narrowed. "That was your mistake." Her breath caught. "Mistake," she whispered. Cassian leaned in so quietly the chandeliers above seemed to steady their light. "I don't care whether you fear me," he said. "I care who else you fear." And suddenly she understood. It wasn't the room. It wasn't the toast. It wasn't Adrian's insult. It was them. All of them. Every single person in that banquet. Because fear wasn't a weakness in Cassian Valenti's world. Fear was a compass. It told him who you thought could kill you. Elena opened her mouth, but he continued. "If you fear me, I can use it." A slow blink. "If you fear them, they can use you." He wasn't teaching her etiquette. He was explaining survival. He stepped past her then, hand brushing her elbow for a fraction of a second. A touch softer than breath. colder than winter. Come. No question. No reassurance. Just command. She followed, pulse trembling. Down the corridor, a door waited. Black glass. No handle. When Cassian was 2 feet away, a sensor hissed and the door slid open. Inside, an office. Not a lounge. Not a sitting room. Not a place meant to impress guests. This was where the Empire breathed. Floor-to-ceiling windows cut the city open at the horizon. A single desk. Dark walnut. No clutter. 2 chairs. A bar tucked against the wall. Untouched. Nothing unnecessary existed here. No trophies. No awards. Power was the decoration. The door sealed behind. Elena felt her throat tighten. This wasn't privacy. This was containment. Cassian removed his cufflinks one by one, placing them on the desk with meticulous care. You asked earlier, he said without looking at her, why I chose you. Her pulse hammered. I thought it was because. It was not because. He cut in of anything you think you are. The words should have hurt. They didn't. They terrified her. Elena stepped forward, voice low. Then why? Cassian leaned against the desk, folding his arms, and when he answered, it wasn't theatrical. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It was frighteningly honest. Because the first time I saw you, he said, you didn't ask what I wanted. She frowned. I didn't know who you were. That's the point. His voice dropped. Everyone wants from me. Money. Status. Safety. Blood. Forgiveness. He looked at her not like an object. Not like territory. But like a man remembering something he hadn't expected to remember tonight. You wanted to know why the man in the lobby was crying. Elena's breath stopped. He continued. You didn't bother with his name. You didn't try to fix him. You didn't pretend to care. He held her gaze. You simply asked if he needed a chair. Her heart hit her ribs. She remembered that day. She remembered the man who'd broken down in the lobby of Armitage Holdings, sobbing quietly into his hands. People stepping around him like furniture. She had offered a chair. Nothing more. Cassian's eyes darkened. You didn't perform empathy, he said. You practiced. Then, that makes you dangerous. Elena blinked. Dangerous. Anyone can flatter. Anyone can seduce. Anyone can beg. He stepped closer again. But someone who sees pain and doesn't ask what they get for helping. His voice grew quieter, colder. Those people dismantle empires. For a moment she forgot to breathe. Cassian leaned back, letting her absorb it. You are a risk, he said. And every risk in my life comes with a cost. And pretending to be your wife is that cost? She asked, trying to stand her ground. No, he replied. Pretending to be my wife is the shield. Silence. Then, simply the cost is what comes after. Elena's pulse trembled. What comes after? Cassian stared at her for a long time, like a man looking at a gun he wasn't sure he should pick up or shoot. Finally, he said, if you become a weakness in their eyes, I'll have to choose. Her stomach twisted. Between. His answer cut the world in half. Protecting you, Cassian said softly, or reminding them I don't have weaknesses. Her breath cracked in her chest. And if they test you, she whispered. He stepped past her toward the door, hands in his pockets, voice calm as winter snow. They won't do it twice. The lights hummed overhead. The city glowed beneath them like embers of a dying fire, and Elena Navarro, caught in a lie so large it wrapped the skyline itself, finally understood. Cassian Valenti hadn't chosen her to pretend. He had chosen her because she was the first person in 10 years who was not pretending, and that made her the most dangerous thing in his world. The office door sighed open, and Cassian walked through it like nothing personal had just been exposed. As if all those sentences, empathy is danger, weakness is leverage, love is liability, were simply administrative memos. Elena followed, but slower. Her pulse wasn't steady anymore. Something tremored beneath her ribs. Something that wasn't fear, wasn't excitement, wasn't admiration. It was the sensation of being noticed in a way she never asked for. When they re-entered the banquet spaces, the lights seemed brighter, harsher, as though the chandeliers had been turned up a notch to burn the truth out of her. Cassian didn't look at her as he returned to the main hall. He didn't hold her arm. He didn't protect her like he had earlier. He merely existed, tall, composed, unstoppable, and the world bent around him. Elena was left at the edge of the corridor. A woman in a gown brushed past with the coldness of royalty. A pair of lawyers whispered at a distance. A young politician eyed her like she was a rumor dressed in silk. It was suffocating. She turned toward the restroom to collect herself. Only a minute. Just long enough to breathe. No one followed her, or so she thought. The lights hummed overhead like electric snow. She steadied herself at the sink, palms pressed against cool stone. Her reflection looked different. Not frightened, not weak, not lost. Something in her eyes had shifted, steel forming where glass used to be. She didn't understand it. She didn't understand him. Pretend you're my wife. You cannot fall in love with me. I'll have to choose. Protecting you, or reminding them I don't have weaknesses. Words with consequences she couldn't yet measure. She splashed water on her wrists, counting slow breaths. Then the door opened. No sound of heels. No chatter. Just the gentle creak. Elena didn't turn. A voice spoke behind her, soft, nasal, rehearsed. You're not real. She froze. No effort to blend in. The kind of face that worked for men like Cassian, but never dined with them. Security? No. Worse. One of those men who sank into luxury because someone larger allowed it. I knew every woman he's ever touched. The stranger said. None of them last long. They burn out or disappear. His smile was not a smile. It was a wound he wanted to share. Elena swallowed. You work for him? No, he chuckled. I work around him. Her stomach tightened. I do the things he pretends not to see, the man continued. And I hear the things he pretends not to know. He stepped closer, too close, fingers tapping the sink. You think you're the first charity project he's pulled from the gutter. Elena didn't respond. She didn't flinch. Silence was armor. The stranger kept going anyway. You think wearing his ring for one night makes you untouchable. He leaned in. It makes you a target. Her skin prickled. He dragged a finger across her wrist. Slow, deliberate, like testing a seam to see how easily it would tear. You're not special, he whispered. You're bait. Elena finally turned her head and met his eyes. Something in her gaze surprised him. Not defiance. Not fear. Calculation. Maybe, she said quietly. But I'm bait sitting in the lion's mouth. The stranger's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Then, too quick, he grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to teach. You're going to regret tonight, he hissed. You're going to ruin him. And when you do, Elena, Cassian's voice cut through the hallway like a blade. 2 syllables. Velvet wrapped around steel. The stranger's fingers loosened instinctively, prey reacting to a predator's shadow. Cassian walked into the doorway. No hurry. No raised voice. No theatrics. Not angry. Worse. Interest. He took in the scene in 3 silent micro-observations. The stranger's stance. Hand still on her wrist. Elena's posture rigid, but unbroken. The sink water dripping down her fingers like cold blood. Then Cassian spoke to the man without looking at him. You have 3 seconds to remove your hand. The stranger scoffed, pretending courage. You can't. Cassian didn't blink. 1. The stranger swallowed. Valenti, listen. 2. A tremor rolled down the man's knuckles. Cassian. 3. It was not a threat. It was a verdict. Cassian was on him before the man could breathe. No shouting. No dramatic wind-up. Just a single motion. He gripped the stranger's wrist and squeezed. Bone pressed against bone. The sound that came out of the man was not a scream, not a cry, but a strangled gasp. The terrified exhale of someone who had never been hurt by a professional. Cassian leaned close, voice calm. "You touched something that is not yours," he said. "And you did it in my building." The stranger writhed. "I didn't." Cassian squeezed harder. "You thought the bathroom was a blind spot," he murmured. "It isn't." He released the wrist. The man stumbled backward, clutching it to his chest. Cassian didn't look at him again. He looked at Elena. Only her. "You're shaking." Her voice was steady. "I'm not." His lips curved. Not a smile. Not approval. Recognition. He stepped toward her, slow and unthreatening, like approaching a wounded animal he intended to protect. "Did he threaten you?" he asked quietly. "No." "Did he frighten you?" Elena met his eyes. "No," she said. "He tried." Cassian's expression changed by only 1 degree. But for men like him, 1 degree was a storm. He turned toward the stranger. "Elena," he said softly, still watching the man. "Step outside." She hesitated. "I said step outside." She did. And as the door closed behind her, she heard only 3 sounds. A breath, a thud, and the quiet reverberation of a man who would never walk confidently again. The corridor outside the restroom was silent. Not the polite silence of luxury parties, not the empty silence of halls at midnight. The silence of something violent having just happened behind a closed door. Elena stood there, spine straight, mouth dry, palms cold. Her pulse hammered, not because she feared Cassian, but because she had no idea what version of him would walk out of that room. Seconds crawled. Then the door opened. Cassian stepped through. No blood on his cuffs, no wrinkle in his suit, no crack in his posture. Men like him didn't look like they'd done anything. The damage happened behind the eyes, not on the skin. He closed the door gently, like he'd just left a meeting. "Elena," he said quietly, "walk with me." Not a question, not a request. A directive designed to keep her alive. She fell in step beside him. He didn't touch her, didn't check if she was okay, didn't ask if she was scared. He assumed she understood one truth now. In this world, survival was not emotional. It was procedural. The hallway widened into a lounge. Dim wood, black leather seats. Floor-to-ceiling windows swallowing the city with snow-lit quiet. Cassian walked to the glass and stopped, hands in his pockets. The skyline breathed beneath them. He didn't turn when he asked, "What did he say to you?" Elena swallowed. "He said I was bait." Cassian lifted his head slightly at that an almost imperceptible reaction. "And you believed him?" "No." "Good." She waited. He didn't elaborate. He just stared at the blizzard outside like he was trying to remember how to hate it. Elena took a slow breath. "You didn't deny it." Now he turned. Not sharply, not with anger, with the softness of someone choosing his words carefully. "I don't deny things that are true." Her heart dropped. "So I am bait." "You're something worse," he murmured. He stepped closer, eyes iron gray. "You're unpredictable." Her pulse leaped. He continued, voice low. "I hand people money, they grovel. I hand them threats, they run. I hand them gifts, they betray me." His gaze sharpened. "But I hand you a crisis. You ask if the target needs a chair." She blinked. Cassian took another step toward her. "You don't play the game," he said. "And that terrifies men who've been cheating at it for decades." His voice dropped into a tone she'd never heard before, quiet, heavy, almost weary. "That makes you dangerous, Elena Navarro. Not bait." Silence pressed between them, thick as velvet. She dared a question. "What did you do to him?" Cassian's eyes shifted. Not guilty, not apologetic. Inevitable. "Enough." "Enough, for what?" she asked. "For him to remember his mistake." Cassian replied, "Every time his hand trembles." She stared at him. "You didn't kill him." "No." The corners of his lips twitched. Something cold, almost amused. "Death is merciful," he said. I don't give mercy to men who touch what's mine. Her breath caught. There it was. Not a metaphor. Not an accident. What's mine? He let the words hang in the air like the last note of a hymn. Then unexpectedly he sighed. Not theatrically. Not dramatically. Just quietly. You shouldn't have been alone, he said. She blinked. I just needed a minute. A minute is enough for a man like that to try his luck. Cassian turned away from her and placed a hand against the glass. His reflection fractured across the city lights. For all their posturing, he said. Every vulture up there is desperate. They're scavengers pretending to be hunters. And you? She asked. He glanced over his shoulder. I'm the environment. Elena swallowed. What does that mean? It means, he said simply. They don't survive me. They adapt to me. He let the snowstorm become a mirror. When something threatens what's mine, I don't chase the threat, he continued. I change the climate until the threat stops breathing. The words were terrifying, not because of their cruelty, but because of how calm they were. He turned back to her. Do you understand now why I told you not to fall in love with me? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not when the world made sense for the first time tonight. Cassian studied her face, reading micro-expressions like data points. You think I'm afraid of love, he said. Elena exhaled. Are you not? He stepped closer. Close enough that heat radiated from his chest through her dress. I'm not afraid of being loved, he murmured. I'm afraid of what I do to the things I love. Her heartbeat tripped. When I care about something, he said. I don't guard. He paused. I destroy anything that tries to take it. No bravado. No seduction. Just a fact. And then for the first time all night, Cassian Valenti confessed something with no audience. No witnesses. No benefit. I don't know if I can do that to you. Time slow. Elena felt something dangerous bloom inside her chest. Not lust. Not fear. Understanding. She said nothing. The kind of nothing that mattered. The kind that made him finally look away. Because for the first time in a decade, Cassian Valenti wasn't sure if he was the hunter, or the man about to walk willingly into a trap. Somewhere down the hall, laughter abrupted again. Music swelled. The party was still alive, still pretending nothing had happened. But Elena knew better. Cassian knew better. The night had already shifted. Not because of violence. Not because of power. But because one man who ruled a city just admitted he didn't know how to rule his own heart. Cassian didn't walk her back through the banquet. He walked her down a private staircase. Polished stone. Black railing. Walls hung with art that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't ask if she was all right. He simply led, and she followed. Not because she was afraid. Because she understood that the man in front of her was thinking. And when a man like Cassian Valenti was thinking, the air itself sharpened. At the base of the stairs a soundless elevator waited. This one didn't need guards. This one knew its master. Doors open. They stepped in. The silence was different from the first ride. Earlier the air was thick with intimidation, rules, threat. The command that ruined her, you cannot fall in love with me. Now the silence was heavy with something older. Something neither of them had language for. Elena leaned against the mirrored wall, pulse steady, mind still replaying his words. I'm afraid of what I do to the things I love. She should have been terrified. She wasn't. The elevator started its descent. Cassian watched his reflection instead of her, like his own eyes were the enemy he was trying to negotiate with. At the lobby level, the doors opened to a waiting car, midnight black paint reflecting snowflakes like falling stars. No driver in sight. Cassian drove himself when the night demanded control. He gestured once. Get in. Not cruel, not cold, just inevitable. Elena slid into the passenger seat. Leather, warm, engine silent until he touched it. Cassian entered beside her. The car hummed to life. The city outside was drowning in snow. Lights blurred into white halos. Buildings vanished into fog. The world felt unreal, soft, dreamlike. only he was solid. Cassian drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting, relaxed as though he could guide a car through a blizzard the way others guide a pencil across paper. Minutes passed. Then, "You think I overreacted?" Not a question. A statement. Helena swallowed. "I think you reacted to someone crossing a boundary." He glanced at her from the corner of his eye. "That is such a polite way of putting it." She breathed slowly. "I don't know how else to put it." Cassian's jaw shifted. A grinding of gears inside bone. "You don't." A pause. "Most people do." Snow swirled against the windows like white static. Helena asked quietly. "Most people fear you." "No," Cassian murmured. "They worship their fear of me." He didn't say it with pride. He said it like a tired man naming a disease. The car moved through the city like a shark through dark water. Streetlights reflected in his eyes. Tiny gold embers against a storm-gray ocean. Helena watched his hand on the wheel. Steady. Controlled. A hand that could break wrists without raising his pulse. But now it simply steered her home. The contradiction did something to her. Finally she spoke. "You don't have to protect me." Cassian didn't turn. "Wrong." She frowned. "I can handle people. You can handle kindness." He cut in. "You cannot handle cruelty and suit." His tone wasn't insulting. It was protective in the way hurricanes protect walls by knocking down the oncoming wave. Helena inhaled sharply. "You think I'm weak?" "No," Cassian said. "I think you're human." The snow blurred the windshield. Wipers sliced through it like black blades. "Humanity," he added, "doesn't survive my world. It gets taxidermied and paraded at funerals." She stared at him. "You speak like someone who's already buried everyone they cared about." Cassian didn't blink. Silence sandwiched itself between them. Then he parked. Not at her apartment complex's front entrance, but in a side alley where no cameras looked and no eyes interfered. They sat there, engines humming, breath fogging the windows. Cassian didn't reach for her, didn't try to take her hand, didn't demand anything. He simply asked, "What did you feel tonight?" The question was too soft, too dangerous. Helena turned her head. "What do you mean?" His eyes met hers, steady, unblinking. "When you stood beside me," he said. "When they said my name like a curse. When they spoke about you like a rumor. When Adrian tested you. When that man touched you." His voice lowered. "What did you feel?" She should have lied. She didn't. "I was angry." Cassian's expression changed by a fraction. "Barely." "Not afraid?" he asked. "No," she murmured. "Just angry." His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "Good." He leaned back in his seat, exhaled once, deep, controlled, measured. "You'll need anger," he said. "Because next time, they won't test you. They'll test us." The car interior grew warm with tension she couldn't name. Then, her mistake. Her unavoidable mistake. She whispered, "Cassian, I'm not falling in love with you." Not defensive. Not flirty. A confession she thought would set him at ease. He turned his head slowly, as if a sniper had sighted him from the rooftops. His expression was unreadable. "No," he said. Helena blinked. "No, what?" Cassian leaned closer. Eyes half shadow, voice a quiet hurricane. "You're lying to yourself, not to me." Her heart slammed into bone. She opened her mouth to protest, to deny, to breathe. He didn't give her the chance. He whispered, "And that," his gaze pinned her in place, "is how it begins." He unlocked the doors. The storm howled outside. "Get some sleep," Cassian said, voice returning to steel. "You'll need it." She stepped out of the car, legs shaky, mind spinning. He didn't drive away yet. He waited until she reached her building's entrance. Only then did he tap the steering wheel twice, a rhythm like a heartbeat, and disappear into the snow. Helena leaned against the glass doorway, chest burning. She had survived the banquet, the judges, the threats, the claws beneath velvet gloves. But the real danger, the man who never raised his voice, the man who never asked for affection, the man who whispered conditions like commandments, Cassian Valenti. Because she realized, she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid she would never recover from the gravity of him. And outside, the blizzard kept falling, as if the sky itself understood what she'd just stepped into.